Tell a friend to tell a friend because I am back with another Ride the Cyclone video. Technically not Ride the Cyclone, it's precursor Legoland. I know that like canonically Legoland isn't a prequel to Ride the Cyclone. It's more like an alternate universe storyline, kind of like how Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man isn't a sequel to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but I think that's a really boring way to think of this story, and I never really cared about artist's intention to begin with. Because if this isn't a prequel, then what? There's no connection to Penny Lamb and Ride the Cyclone, and we can't draw parallels or theories between them. I think that is very lame. It would make for a very boring video. So I believe wholeheartedly that Legoland is a prequel to Ride the Cyclone, and I always have. Not only because that lends itself to the best theories, but because Legoland was literally made and produced before Ride the Cyclone. Anyways, this video, while being mostly an explanation of Legoland, is also a vessel for me to talk about more of my theories that are Legoland specific. And since I'm certain the majority of you have not and will never see a production of Legoland, I am not going to give the same disclaimer that I did with my Ride the Cyclone video. Just know that I highly recommend that you go and read the play for yourself, so that you can form your own opinions, and you're not just like basing your opinions off of my opinions. You get it? Okay. Let's begin. Legoland was co-directed by Britt Small and Jacob Richmond, the same people who would go on to co-direct the first few productions of Ride the Cyclone, and it starred Celine Stubble as Penny Lamb and Amitai Marmstein as her younger brother Ezra Lamb. Fun fact, the actor Amitai Marmstein, who played Ezra in the premiere of Legoland, has an extensive IMDb page featuring some of my favorite works, such as Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Power Rangers 2017, The Magicians, and not one, not two, but 3 separate episodes of the hit CW nightmare Supernatural. And he was not just in any episode, he was in The French Mistake. And anybody watching this who also has the supernatural brain rot understands how slay that is. And how insane it is that Ride the Cyclone and Supernatural, 2 of my most used Tumblr tags, have collided in this way. In the play, Penny is only 16 years old versus the other characters in Ride the Cyclone who are like 17, 18, and Ezra is only 13 years old. Penny is described as being an immensely nervous and self-conscious teenager, which I think explains, other than the fact that, like, obviously Jane doesn't have a head, why in all the promo pictures for Ride the Cyclone, Jane is covering her face when she's with the choir. Now, one of my favorite things about reading Legoland after having seen Ride the Cyclone is noticing all of, like, the writing similarities and parallels, and I don't know if Jacob, like, went into writing this being like, hey, look at all this similar language connecting the books and connecting the worlds of the story. Or if I'm just like reading too much into Canadian lingo, but words like crummy to describe feeling bad, Penny says in Legoland, and also Constance says in Ride the Cyclone. Also, the use of the word gancha to describe weed is something that I've never heard before, and I'm almost certain it's just a Canadian thing. But Penny uses it in Legoland, and Ocean mentions it in What the World Needs. Also, it's not in the current version, but I swear to God, in one of the past versions, Karnak says the line, "Let me whisk you away to happier times," in like the beginning of the show, and Penny uses that exact line in Legoland. I just think those little things are so neat. But let me give you a little rundown about what actually happens in the play. Penny and Ezra have committed so many crimes, like trafficking drugs, selling drugs, illegal border crossing, entering bars as a minor, assault, attempted murder, etc., etc. And now the 2 of them are giving like a presentation to like acknowledge that what they did was wrong and dissuade other people from following in their footsteps. Penny and Ezra grew up and for the majority of their life lived in the Elysium Community Farms, which is like just outside of Uranium City. And they used to sneak out around the time that Penny turned like 13 to Uranium City and go to Walmart and fail at talking to people, because alongside them growing up in like this weird rural cult area and not really being socialized properly and know how to talk to people, that plus, you know, people just wanting to go buy their groceries and stuff at Walmart don't really want to be talked to by a bunch of teenagers, that combination did not make for a good social situation for either of them. But they devised a plan. They were like, what's something that draws communities together? Crisis. So Ezra would fake having seizures, and then Penny would be like, oh no, this little child, he's having a seizure, we have to save him. And she would save him, and then like the whole crowd would be like so happy that like this little boy lived, and like it would help start conversation. But they did this one too many times, and the manager of the Walmart was like, hey, this is really suspicious, this is really weird, I'm gonna call the cops and get these kids out of my Walmart. And the cops took them back to the Elysium Community Farms, and they shut them down. because apparently the Elysium Community Farm was the largest marijuana growing co-op in Saskatchewan. This leads to them becoming wardens of the state, I guess, and getting placed, you guessed it, at the St. Cassian Catholic School. Because they're the new kids, they stick out like a sore thumb. And Penny is viciously bullied for being a lesbian, slay, and her and Ezra get sent to Dr. Prattle, who is the school psychiatrist, and they get put on a myriad of drugs that then they later go on to traffic and sell. Penny, in an attempt to fit in, starts listening to the CD that another student, Tammy, gives her by a band called 7 Up, who ironically only have 5 members. And as a 17 fan, I fully understand that struggle. And she is instantly obsessed. She loves them, but with one member in particular, Johnny Moon. 7 Up sadly break up after 3 short years and 168 albums together, not including their holiday albums. Their short-lived career is caused by the public predictably and swiftly turning their backs on them because any interest marketed towards women is automatically bad. And after one of their other members, Billy, gets torn literally limb from limb, and any chance of a full band reunion is sent off with him. This leaves Penny heartbroken, and Johnny left doing celebrity infomercials. And over the next year, Penny would go on to write over 3,500 letters to him, to which she does get one response. Until eventually, Johnny comes out with his solo album. Now, Penny camps out all night in front of the record store because she wants to be the first person to hear this album, only to put the CD into her CD player and hear the song soon to sweep the nation, Fuck You with My Chainsaw. Now, Johnny Moon has pulled a real Liam Payne and is now rebranded to JK47 and is now a gangster rapper. Despite growing up in the whitest city in the world, Portland, Oregon, Penny is truly heartbroken, betrayed. This is not the man she knows and loves. So when she sees in the newspaper that Johnny is going to be having a CD sighting in Orlando, Florida, at a club ironically named The Bitch Slap, she simply must go. She has to go see him. She has to show that this isn't him. So she devises a plan. The Lamb siblings have some money saved up from all of the drug selling. So they're going to take a Greyhound bus tour of the US and go from Uranium City, Saskatchewan all the way down to Orlando, Florida to talk some sense into Johnny. On the way, they stop in Seattle, Washington, where they go to pick up Johnny's favorite coffee, the Moonbeam, which is apparently only sold at the Space Needle, and which I was very disappointed to find out is not real. They also go to McDonald's for the first time, and they get Happy Meals, a tradition they will upkeep throughout their multi-city tour, getting toys such as a Hollywood hair Barbie, a Mormon pamphlet, a junior membership to the NRA, and a Jim Crow Let's Go a Lynching kit. When they finally get to Orlando, they get some poor Starbucks barista to brew up that Moonbeam for them, and then they head to the club, only to get stopped at the door because, these teenagers do not have the ID to get into a 21 plus club. What to do? Old habits die hard. And there goes Ezra, shaking on the floor, faking a seizure. Alas, when Penny finally gets into the club to confess her undying love to Johnny, he shuns her, disavows her. He says he's no longer teeny bopper Johnny Moon, and he's a serious rapper now. And he wants her kicked out of the club immediately. When Penny doesn't take no for an answer, things escalate, with Johnny eventually calling her a feminist lesbian, which causes a little bit of a mental breakdown in Penny, resulting in her jumping on a table and literally biting his face off. Her and Ezra are quickly extradited back to Canada. And despite Johnny's team not pressing charges, fearing that the story of a little 15-year-old girl kicking the ass of a heartless killer like JK47 would be bad for press, the story does get out, and Penny becomes semi-famous for a bit. She even gets a Movie of the Week biopic made of her, where she's played by Too Little Too Late icon JoJo. She gets probation for the drug dealing, which is how she ends up giving this presentation, fully ready to live a better, more lawfuler life, until she dies horrifically on a roller coaster accident never to be seen again. Now it is time to dig in with the theories. There's no timeline with this story like there is with Ride the Cyclone, but we do know that she's 13 when she starts sneaking out into Uranium City. Ezra starts faking the seizures and they get moved to St. Cassian. And then she's 15 when her whole whirlwind fun of drug trafficking and selling and the almost murder happens, and then she's 16 at the time of the presentation. Now, to me, you can take this one of two ways. One, you can take it by debut date and think that Legoland debuted in 2006 and Ride the Cyclone debuted in 2008. So they are 2 years apart, i.e. at the time of Ride the Cyclone, Penny is 18. So she's the oldest of the group and she's an upperclassman, and that is why they don't know her. That's really the main thing that I use Legoland for, TBH, is figuring out how Penny fits into the Ride the Cyclone universe, because if everybody knew everybody in Uranium, why doesn't the choir know Penny? There are many reasons for this. I think the main one is that she literally doesn't have a head, so when they're like talking to her and looking at her, that's like not her face, so they don't recognize her, and they aren't taking too much time out of their like freak out of being like, oh my god, I'm dead, to like really take the time to like think about it. But I think it's also because she's an upperclassman and they don't know her that well. And sure, small school, you probably know everybody regardless of what year they're in. And based on how, like, widely tormented Penny is at that school, it'd be pretty weird for them not to know her. But I think it's more likely to not know someone, or at least not well, if they're not in your same year and you're not in all the same classes together. And I think this is supported by the fact that everyone in the choir is the same age. They're all in the same year because they're all 17 except for Misha, who is 18 but had just turned 18 in the August prior to all the September events of Ride the Cyclone. So they're all 17 going on 18. They're all going into their senior year. Which brings me to my second train of thought, and the one that I personally believe, that the events of Legoland happened right before the ones in Ride the Cyclone. Because when did Legoland debut? August of 2006. And when does Ride the Cyclone take place? September. And Penny's birthday is April 7th. Happy belated birthday, by the way. And I think that she had just turned 16 in the April 7th. And then in order for her to be like cleared to go back to school in September, they have her have this presentation in August. And I think it makes perfect sense for them to not know her as an underclassman. Like during my time at school, I knew a lot more students older than me than younger than me. Cause like if I'm a senior, why am I hanging around a sophomore? Ew, that's a child. And I'm like an adult. So if Penny's 16 and the rest of the choir is 17, 18, that makes perfect sense. And it's even that more heartbreaking because she was that much younger than the rest of them. And here is where I start laying the foundation for my Ocean and Penny grew up together theory. And I know people have speculated about them being cousins, and I've never personally believed that, but ever since reading Legoland, I've 100% believed that Ocean, or at least Ocean's parents, and Penny grew up together on the Elysium community farms. For one, Penny has this moment in her like opening speech where she describes all the things that you shouldn't do to like live a better, more lawfuler life. And she ends that section with, well, that should cover a lot of ground considering that's like every high school play or movie I've ever seen in like 10 seconds flat. And I didn't do any of the above mentioned stuff. I've taken all those lessons to heart and obeyed them. Does that not just scream Ocean? Doesn't that sound just like Ocean's speech where she's like, I've seen enough reality TV to get what you want us to do here. Like, they both took on this idea that the media that they see on TV is indicative of how to act in real life. And that would make perfect sense if they both, like, grew up, or at least Ocean's parents who then raised Ocean with, like, these ways of thinking. If they both grew up in, like, this weird cult where their only connections to the outside world and how to interact with people was through what they saw on TV and in movies. And these were, like, their guidelines for socializing. Also, the Lamb's description of Elysium is exactly how Karnak describes Ocean's parents. Like, they say the main things to describe Elysium: sunshine, philosophy, love, humanism, ganja, weed. Karnak literally describes Ocean's parents as far left of center humanists, and Ocean is the one to say the word ganja in her solo song. Ezra also mentions a lot of people quoting Eastern philosophy, which would connect to the Buddhist beliefs that Ocean has. But the real nail in the coffin for me is when Penny says, and all the kids there were named Rainbow, Sunshine, Trotsky. Does Ocean not sound like a name that would fit in perfectly with kids named Rainbow and Sunshine? And Trotsky is assumedly taken from the name Leon Trotsky, who is a very well-known Marxist, and who did Ocean have a cutout of in her original Canadian Ride the Cyclone number play to win? Karl Marx. I rest my case. For this to make sense though, Ocean's parents would have had to have moved sometime before Ocean was born or shortly after, because Ocean mentions how she knows most of the choir, or has known most of the choir, since pre-K. And I can't see why they would move if they still held so many of the same like beliefs and practices. Like they don't seem like opposed or against any of the things going on at Elysium. Like Karnak said, Ocean's parents moved to Uranium City to live a carbon-free lifestyle. So maybe they like both grew up outside of Uranium City, met somewhere else, and then both moved there because they heard of the Elysium community farms and they like thought that that was their dream place to live their carbon-free lifestyle. What caused them to move though? I don't know. Maybe because they grew up outside of the farms, the lifestyle was just too different and they couldn't live there comfortably. I don't know. Let me know what you think. But the point is that Ocean's parents eventually moved to Uranium City proper, and they had Ocean and they raised her outside of the farms, but with like the same beliefs and values there, which really saved their asses because that meant that they didn't get caught up in the drug bust that took Penny and Ezra's parents away. Now, if you've seen my last Ride the Cyclone video, you already have an idea of my was Penny a part of the choir theory. But for those of you who haven't seen that video, and if you haven't, you really should, here's a quick rundown. I don't think she was ever a part of the choir. I think it was more of a wrong place, wrong time scenario. Like, despite her obvious interest in music and the fact that she says without music, life would be a mistake, I genuinely don't think that they knew her, going back to my different ages theory, because why would they remember each other but not her, especially if she was a part of their very small 5-person choir. There is that line in her song where she says, "A choir never complete," and I've heard people like theorize that that line means that she's part of the choir, and because she was never identified, the choir is never complete. But I think that's more of just like an observational line, because it's preceded by, "I hear, and from the ground beneath my feet, I hear the anguish of the streets, a choir never complete." So I think she's just like observing these things, hearing these things, the anguish of the street, and the choir never complete. I think either like on her own accord she snuck out of St. Cassian when she heard that there was a field trip out of town, or what I think more plausibly, this was part of her community service. Like her social worker thought it would be a good idea to put her in more clubs and activities and like focus her time to keep her away from committing more crimes, you know? Similar to what happened with Misha when he stole the 3 boxes of communion wine and that's what put him into the choir. I think the same thing is happening with Penny. But since the choir was deep into competition season, as we know, because they were going to the fair to compete in the Kiwanis International Singing Competition, that they couldn't have her join like now. So they told her, just come along on the trip, get a vibe of the group, and you could join after the competition season is over. And I think everyone else was so focused on 1, the competition prior to their deaths, and 2, the fact that they were dead throughout the show, that they couldn't stop and think, hey, remember that weird kid that went on the trip with us? Maybe it was her that died. This would also tie back to the line that Karnak says of the rumors of a girl who joined at the last minute, because technically she did. Ultimately though, I think they don't know her because it makes for a more interesting and compelling character to have somebody die that nobody ever knew. But I think the theories are fun anyways. Now for Ezra. I think theorizing about what happened to Ezra after the accident is super fun because we genuinely have no idea. Like, he's never mentioned once in Ride the Cyclone, never even alluded to, and then his sister just disappears. Was he there the day of the accident? Did he come with Penny? Like, if we're going off of the she was specifically invited theory, then him being there doesn't make any sense unless he was also under some social worker contract. But I think Penny would have been invited because she has some draw to music. So Ezra, who does not have that same connection, it would not make any sense for him to be on that same plan. If anything, someone would notice how much trouble they get into together and try to foster their own like independence and interest. So it would make sense that Ezra was specifically not coming with Penny on this trip. But then did he know that the unidentified body was hers? Like, I mentioned this before, but I just don't understand how there could be an unidentified body of a St. Cassian student in a St. Cassian uniform. Like, I feel like it'd be so simple for like a law enforcement person or someone to go to the school and be like, hey, are you missing a student other than the 5 that were identified? And then they'd look at their records and be like, oh my god, yes we are, thank you. Like, the only way I think it could have happened was like some weird legal red tape, because Penny/Jane mentions at the beginning of her speech in Ride the Cyclone, no parents came and so they never learned my name. So maybe her body could only be identified via specific parental lineage, and because her parents are currently doing 15 years in prison, they couldn't come and identify the body. But even then I'm like, at least Ezra has to know, because he knew Penny was going on this trip and she never came back. Now, if you really wanted to hat with me, we could think that Penny actually snuck out of St. Cassian, snuck onto the van that was leaving for the Wonderville Traveling Fairgrounds because she wanted to join the choir, but like Ocean or someone was like, you can't join the choir right now, we have a competition tomorrow. So Penny snuck out and like didn't tell anybody. All Ezra knows is she just like disappeared one day, which is like extra sad and heartbreaking, but also makes like a little less sense because why after all that they've been through, would Penny just start excluding Ezra from her schemes? Maybe Penny felt responsible for getting Ezra into all this legal trouble with the traveling across the continent to bite a man's face off. So she was trying to like keep him out of this to protect him? I don't know. Neither of these theories are like at 100%. So like let me know which one you want to believe, or if you have like a different theory, also let me know. Now, one thing that Legoland brings up that is not mentioned in Ride the Cyclone is the fact that St. Cassian is a boarding school. And from what it sounds like, none of the members of the choir live on campus. They all live with their families. And the one thing that I know about boarding schools, like the main thing, is that you live on campus. They provide room and board. I'm willing to believe that because the town is so small that living on campus is optional, because I know that with most boarding schools it is not, but maybe it's like just a boarding school for Penny and Ezra because they have no other place to stay. I don't know, unclear. But the fact that this is a boarding school raises a very interesting question for me. Why doesn't Misha live on campus? Because his adopted parents clearly hate him. And boarding school is infamously where you send troubled teens to get like course corrected or whatever. So if that's an option and he already goes to the school, then why haven't his parents like enrolled him to stay and live on campus? I can't imagine why they wouldn't, other than like judgment from other parents. Like they're worried that other people will think less of them for like just adopting this kid and then not having him stay with them and like just shipping him off to boarding school, but like they also lock him in a basement. So I at least like to imagine that Misha has sort of like an Eric Foreman style basement with its like own entrance and exit, so he can come and go as he pleases, and mostly so he doesn't have to run into his family by going up and out the main door. And it's a little bit more humane, a little less dungeony. But maybe the school isn't actually made to house students, like maybe they just stuck Penny and Ezra in like a cupboard under the stairs, because I can't think of another reason why Misha wouldn't live on campus. Like maybe he started living on campus but like broke too many rules. It was just like a general menace to society that they like kicked him out, like along the same lines of the stealing boxes of communion wine. He just like did not vibe with living there. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Other random things to think about. What happened to the rest of the members of 7UP? Did any of them go on to have solo careers that Penny just didn't mention because she doesn't care about the other members? Is one of them perhaps going to show up on the cruise ship in the heavily rumored trilogy as like a washed up lounge singer? I think that would be a great connection. Why does this school have a psychiatrist? Like, I get a school counselor, but like a man who's just prescribing all of these very young teens drugs willy-nilly? Like, that's a big oof, my friend. Especially at like a Catholic school, I feel like something so like science driven, especially since we have a teacher who's like against teaching of evolution, to have like medication on site that you could give to students just feels like very counterintuitive to like their whole brand. How did Ocean, who argues with everyone about everything, survive in a school with such crazy rigid thinking? Because like I just mentioned, there's a very short interaction with Penny and one of the teachers at the school where one of the teachers is like berating Penny for like speaking up in class, and she says, Penny, we're Catholics, we don't believe in Darwin. But Ocean literally has her line in What the World Needs saying, Darwin has a theory called evolution. And the teacher also says they can't use big words like conformity or intelligence, but there's no way that Ocean doesn't use language like that. Like, I think this really short teacher interaction just really emphasizes why Ocean was so desperate to leave and why that goal that she had worked so hard for being taken away was like so devastating. Because this life sounds like hell, especially for someone like her. Was the mega mall that Noel worked at just outside of Uranium City the same place that has the Walmart that Penny and Ezra went to? There is literally nothing to suggest this connection, but hear me out. A small town would want to keep their shopping area close together, because why are you having people drive like 20 miles to a grocery store and then another 10 miles to a Walmart when you can have them all in the same area? And they're not like hurting for land or anything, they're in the middle of nowhere. And I know Noel said it's just outside of Uranium City and Penny said they went into Uranium City, but I can easily write that off as like city line technicalities and children not knowing exactly where they are. And if it's a true mega mall, it would want to have everything in that one little shopping area. So for them to rope in a Walmart and a Taco Bell, I think would be very easy. I mostly just like this theory because I think it'd be very funny for Noel to be like working a shift at Taco Bell and then for like a coworker or someone to come up to him and be like, have you heard about the kid who keeps having seizures at Walmart? And he's like, yeah, that's crazy, man. When's my break? Lastly, is the school ADA accessible? Because Penny, when she's describing her being like violently bullied, says she was being pushed down the stairs, pushed up the stairs, pushed to the side of the stairs, soon avoiding stairs altogether, which made it very difficult because my locker and most of my classes were on the second floor. But Ricky, at least before the rewrites, was disabled. There was no way he could continuously be going up and down the stairs to get to class. Was there like no service elevator that Penny could use or something? Again, I know it's the early 2000s, but if you see a student continuously being pushed up and down the stairs, you would want to find them some sort of alternative to safely get to class, right? If there wasn't one for her, was there at least one for Ricky because he has a documented disability? I wouldn't be surprised though if this very rural school in the middle of nowhere was not accessible and they had to just like put all of his classes on the main floor or something. This though I think would make for a really good Ricky and Jane like connection pre events of Ride the Cyclone. If they like rode the elevator together to get to class and they never really like knew each other but like knew of each other because they both traveled the same way up and down the elevators. I think that would just be really cute, like ships passing in the night. One last thing. You know the saying, like a lamb to a slaughter? I think that just fits so perfectly with the story of Ride the Cyclone. Like, I don't know if Jacob had some, like, multi-stage plan to have that fit so perfectly in the story, but, like, the meaning being people do something without knowing that there's going to be, like, a horrible outcome to it, and that's, like, what happened to all of the children. They got on the roller coaster not knowing it was going to break, not knowing it was going to lead to their deaths, but then also Penny's last name being Lamb to the slaughter. It's so perfect, and I love it so much. But this is where my theories end for the day. I'm very intrigued to see what you all have to say about Legoland, considering that my summary of the play was very sparse, and I don't know how some of y'all are gonna judge this play based on that, but I'm excited to see. But please, let me know what your theories are. I know that Legoland is significantly less popular than Ride the Cyclone, but I think we need to be tying Legoland as much into our Ride the Cyclone theories and world as possible, because it is part of the trilogy. So, let me know what you think of the show, what you think of the theories. Have you read Legoland? I recommend that you do. Have you seen Legoland? If you have, please, all your thoughts and your theories in the comments below. Sam, aspiring Ride the Cyclone theorist, signing out.